Hello, and welcome to UPL Insights, a digital media series from UPL, led by our teams changing the game for farmers across the African continent. My name is Florent Clair, and we are recording this new episode ahead of the World Cocoa Foundation annual partnership meeting, to which UPL will be participating. As a member of the World Cocoa Foundation since 2016, in previous years, my colleagues from UPL and I would travel from Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and France to join the cocoa world in these annual partnership meetings. But this year, the WCF is a virtual event, so we have taken the conversation online to speak to some of the people leading the efforts to reshape living income, sustainability, and resilience for the cocoa value chain. Today, I'm joined by Tim McCoy, who is based in Abidjan and has nearly 9 years experience in the cocoa sector. Tim serves as Vice President for Country Relations at the World Cocoa Foundation, and as a part of the WCF's representation of the cocoa industry, Tim's role is to guide the WCF's high-level policy dialogue and government relations, with a focus on Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. His experience gives us a fascinating insight into the topic that we will be exploring today, and will help us answer the challenging question of what does sustainability mean in the cocoa sector? In fact, what does sustainability mean at all? And I was in a meeting once with an academic who said, sustainability is a word with no single meaning, which is why everyone can agree on it. I think she was only half joking, because it does seem that the definition can change according to different countries, business areas, and even different crops. So maybe the better question for sustainability in the cocoa sector is to look at the problems we're trying to solve, the things we're trying to protect, and the outcomes we're trying to preserve. In the cocoa sector, this can be a very long list, and I'm grateful today to explore the work that is being led by the WCF, and also to delve into some of the industry-wide coalitions that have made commitments around responsible business, like the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, of which UPL is also a signatory. Because from fair pricing for cocoa beans and sustainable farm practices to deforestation and child labor, there is no such thing as a minor concern in the cocoa trade, and there are countless examples that show that the best way to protect and preserve is to work together. So I'd like to start by asking our guest today, what does cocoa sustainability mean to you and to the people you represent?
Thank you, Florent. And before I respond to the question, I do want to thank you and your company for your support and participation over the years in WCF's annual partnership meeting, which of course is a really unique event that allows for the private sector to come together to discuss this range of sustainability issues that you've alluded to in your opening comments. So again, thank you for all the support over the years. In terms of what sustainability means to the World Cocoa Foundation, in fact, that's a question that we've been giving a lot of thought to over the past 3 to 4 years as we've looked back over lessons learned over the past couple of decades even, and thought anew about our strategy and our approach to the key sustainability questions that are confronting the cocoa sector, and in fact have confronted the cocoa sector for a long time. So if you look at issues like a sustainable production, a sustainable supply chain, sustainable consumption, and an overall strategic approach to management of the sector, these are some sort of headlines that provide some idea of how we define sustainability and the challenges associated with it. More specifically, some of our key goals in terms of sustainability are achieving a cocoa sector where farmers are able to prosper, where their businesses are seen in a modernized manner, where farmers view cocoa farming as a business that delivers a sustainable livelihood. Of course, farmers and their families live in communities, and we see empowered communities as a second key pillar to a sustainable future for the cocoa sector, where human rights are protected, the safety and well-being of children and families are strengthened. And then the third major pillar, the third major way that the WCF has of looking at cocoa sustainability focuses on the planet, of course, on which we all live, and indeed on which all cocoa trees grow. And so we look forward to a future where the planet's health is conserved and enhanced. There's resilient and diverse landscapes, biodiverse landscapes, and where, of course, the sector has a reduced carbon footprint. So those are some of the high-level ways that we look at sustainability, and indeed we're in the process of putting into place a new strategy that addresses all of those key elements that I just touched on: prosperous farmers, empowered communities, and a healthy planet.
Thanks, Tim. That's fascinating and such a wide scope of challenges that sustainability to tackle. And I'm not even sure that the cocoa industry alone can change that. What I hear from you is that the challenges you mentioned concern both the public and the private sector. So I would love to hear about how WCF work with these partners. What is your strategic approach? What are your priorities and the approaches to help overcome these issues, actually?
Florent, you're exactly right. This issue of cocoa sustainability and achieving a sustainable cocoa sector is a tremendous undertaking, and indeed it requires the contributions, the expertise, the talents of many different stakeholders, and not just those that can be found in the chocolate and cocoa sector. The World Cocoa Foundation, nearly since our beginning, has in fact championed the idea of public-private partnerships. So where the talents, the expertise, the resources of industry are put together with the talents, the resources, and the expertise of partners in government, for example. We see that it's absolutely essential that industry, industry and government work closely together to achieve these key objectives in sustainability. In a country like Cote d'Ivoire or in neighboring Ghana, cocoa is too important of a crop for both countries for the government to not play a role. And as you'll know well, government does indeed play a big role. So it makes perfect sense that industry and government would partner together on building new multi-stakeholder collaboration and partnerships, in working together to design effective government policies and regulatory frameworks, and indeed in aligning public-private sector investments and coordinating those investments so that maximum impact is achieved.
Excellent. Can you maybe give us a few examples of the main initiatives and programs that the cocoa sector has shaped and worked on in a coalition? Because I think which is quite unique and nice about the cocoa sector is how the whole industry has learned to work collectively in a pre-competitive approach to tackle these challenges. So if you can take us through the major programs that you have worked on in the last 9 years, just to give us an idea.
Oh, thanks. Over the course of 9 years, of course, there are quite a range of different programs, and all of these programs have, I think, provided a strong foundation for the World Cocoa Foundation and our members to better understand, indeed, what is meant by something like pre-competitive or non-competitive collaboration around different programs to advance sustainability in the sector. I think back to the Cocoa Livelihoods Program, which was co-funded by industry and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with, of course, involvement by government as well. And that program laid the foundation for collaborative work on issues like improving farmer livelihoods, in use of improved planting materials, in diversifying income at the farm level again, with an eye on improving farmer livelihoods. We've worked together on social development programs, again, with a public-private partnership approach, where we've received funding from the U.S. Agency for International Development, for example, also from industry to undertake programs aimed at educating children in cocoa growing communities, empowering women through structures called Village Savings and Loans Associations, where concepts such as management of money and provision of microloans and microcredit is made possible in cocoa growing communities to improve the livelihoods of cocoa growing families. More recently, we've been deeply involved in a major initiative called the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, where industry has come together with government and signed an ambitious framework of action that aims to eliminate cocoa-related deforestation in the supply chain. This was a carefully negotiated framework where there was very intense discussion and negotiations on both sides, and finally we were able to arrive at an agreement on the key elements of what the framework would look like, and we're now in the process of putting together this really unprecedented effort to, again, stop deforestation in the supply chain. We are currently in discussions to do a similarly ambitious initiative around child labor, where we would look to dramatically scale up industries' investments in child labor monitoring and remediation systems in their supply chains, where we would look at scaling up industry support for education, support for construction of education infrastructure, and other elements that are deemed to be amongst the root causes of child labor, which of course is a major challenge for the sector. So those are just a few examples spread out over the course of about 9 years, looking back to say around 2011, 2012, and bringing you right up through the present moment.
True, yeah. So many initiatives. Brilliant work of the WCF over the years, I must say, and UPL is so proud of being just a part of the solution, probably on the productivity aspects, to provide the right inputs and support services to grow more cocoa on less land, and also to support farmer in the diversification of their income with the introduction of the food crops. So to take a different angle, 2020 can probably be elected as the toughest year that the humanity has faced in the 21st century, and this is mostly due to the impact of the COVID-19 on our health and economies. The African continent has shown great resilience and adaptation, though, as the impacts of the disease on the continent were much less than expected. Would you say that COVID-19 has had any impact on the life of cocoa farmers?
Well, sure, and I agree with you, Florent. What a challenging year this has been, whether in Europe, North America, Asia, or here in Africa. And yes, at least so far, according to reports, the impact of COVID has been less in Africa than was feared initially. Nevertheless, there has been an impact here. This has dramatically affected the way people go about their normal lives. Of course, one can easily imagine families living in rural areas all of a sudden hearing about this virus, this potentially lethal virus that's coming from who knows where, and the kind of just fear and concern that might initially instill in farming families right across the cocoa growing regions of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. Beyond that, I think we also are concerned about the potential commercial impact of COVID, or economic impact of COVID. We've of course seen a downturn in the economies in Europe, North America, and Asia. These are major cocoa and chocolate consuming regions of the world, and of course, as consumption falls, demand for cocoa is going to fall. So there are some concerns that the reduced demand for chocolate and cocoa products will ultimately lead to reduced demand for cocoa, and then of course that has an impact on farmers' revenues, on their pockets, so to speak. So that's something we're continuing to keep an eye open for, and you will have seen how the governments in both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire have taken measures to try to support farmer incomes during this period of COVID. The industry is also very aware of the health impact, of course, in the potential health impact in cocoa growing communities. And that's why earlier this year, industry raised over $800,000 to support anti-COVID-19 efforts in cocoa growing communities in a number of producing countries, providing things like awareness raising information and messaging, providing hand washing stations and antibacterial soaps in cocoa growing communities and in schools in those communities. And in that effort, we again leveraged our approach of a public-private partnership. We, of course, knew there was a need. We knew that there were great partners like CARE Cote d'Ivoire and CARE Ghana that were well placed to deliver these supplies and this information in communities, but we, of course, wanted to consult with the government. And so we had intensive conversations with the Conseil du Café Cacao and the Ministry of Health and Public Hygiene here in Cote d'Ivoire, both of which helped us understand better the way the epidemic is playing out on the ground and helped guide us in terms of where our support was ultimately focused in the communities that received it.
Thank you, Tim. Very, very interesting. So, looking back at what has been achieved over the last 10 or 15 years, during which the cocoa sector has really invested a lot of efforts into the sustainability programs. If we project ourselves in the future, what should the cocoa sector look like in 20 years' time, in your opinion?
Well, none of us has a crystal ball, as the saying goes. So we can't with certainty predict the future. And indeed, at times over the past decade, I know that some of our predictions and some of our objectives have been affected and ultimately altered by changes in the sector. But having said that, I would come back again to the three major strategic focus areas for the World Cocoa Foundation: prosperous farmers, empowered communities, and a healthy planet. For prosperous farmers, I think we absolutely would want to see a future where the net household income in the cocoa supply chain is increased significantly to address some of the revenue issues that we all recognize are present in cocoa growing communities. You touched earlier on productivity. Increased productivity is thought to be one way by which farmers can improve their revenue and improve their overall approach to growing cocoa on less land. So those are two key areas under what we call the prosperous farmers pillar, where we see the future. On empowered communities, of course, this problem, the scourge of child labor in the cocoa supply chain, is a major reputational risk for the sector, and is not a sustainable future, even at the family and community level. So the elimination of the worst forms of child labor in the cocoa supply chain, and especially the elimination of any forced labor in the supply chain, is one of the major objectives as we look to the future. And more broadly, making sure that in cocoa growing communities, children are able to realize their potential. That children, for example, are provided birth certificates so that they can access schooling in their communities, just to name one example. And of course, both countries, to their great credit, have ambitious, robust national action plans on child labor in place. And of course, achieving the objectives that are laid out in those national action plans will contribute to the future that we very much want to see for the sector when it comes to the issue of child labor. And then finally, on healthy planet, we've already established the ambitious goal of zero deforestation in the cocoa supply chain, and achieving that will help pave pave the way for a better future for the overall cocoa sector. And then going beyond that, where lands have been deforested or degraded because of cocoa production, making sure that those lands are either reforested or are upgraded in a way that realizes their best potential in an environmentally friendly way. So those are some, again, fairly high level, definitely ambitious ways that we're looking at the future of the sector.
Yes, fairly ambitious indeed. So good luck with all that, Tim, and we will be supporting the efforts of the industry for a better cocoa sector in the future. Thank you so much for taking us through the topic of sustainability in the cocoa sector, Tim, today, and to some of the work you are leading with cocoa industry and public and private partners. To find out more about UPL work on cocoa sustainability and to read about our work with the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, you can click the link in the description of this video. You can also subscribe to this channel to follow our full podcast series for the WCF partnership meeting and previous episode. Thank you and see you on the next one.